This is Guideposts with Dr. Tim Stauffer, a podcast where Tim and his friends engage in purposeful conversation about identity, parenting, culture, faith, and more. Tim Stauffer is a professor of counseling and a licensed clinical counselor. My name is Sam Meyung, and I'm Tim's friend. My life has been greatly enriched by my time talking to Tim and getting his thoughts on many matters that impact my life daily. After listening to this podcast, I hope you feel the same. Guideposts are discernment markers. They provide opportunities for direction as well as warnings of pitfalls. Go this way and be careful of that way. We hope that each episode provides some sense of direction as we navigate the challenges of daily life. Thanks so much for listening. Quick disclaimer, the content of this podcast is for educational purposes only. It is not intended to be a substitute for professional advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your licensed mental health provider. Welcome to Guideposts with Dr. Tim Stauffer. Tim, glad to be with you today.
Good morning, Sam. This will be a fun conversation again. I always enjoy connecting with you. And so set up what we're going to talk about. I think we're going to be following up on our previous episode related to attachment theory and attachments. But set up the conversation for us, and where are we headed today?
Yep. Okay, so this is going to be a part 2 of attachment theory, attachment styles conversation. So if you haven't listened to the first one, I would definitely recommend going back and listening to that, because what we're going to talk about today is really only going to make sense in light of that previous conversation. But we're in our last conversation, a quick recap, we were talking about attachment theory, and it's essentially a theory of how we relate to other people. Rooted in this idea of if you have a high or low view of others and a high and low view of self, impacts the way you're going to relate to other people. And so those 4 main styles being a secure one, a secure attachment style, which is the high view of self and others, an avoidant one, which is a high view of self but low view of others, a preoccupied attachment style, which is low view of both self and low view of self but a high view of others. Right. This is kind of like the idea of like a more like needy kind of person.
Right. At the far end of the continuum, the preoccupied is in essence saying, I'm really desperate. Yeah. I need you because I can have confidence in you. I don't really trust myself in these spaces, and so that can present as an intense kind of needy. Yeah. I need your constant reassurance that I'm okay. Yep.
And then the final one being a low view of self and a low view of others, creating a fearful attachment style. Right. And so in the last episode, we talked a lot about what does this kind of look like in ourselves, and being able to start to identify where you most relate to. And so today, we kind of started talking about this a little bit in our last podcast, but wanted to just dedicate some more time thinking about, okay, as parents, how can we foster a secure attachment style? That's obviously the best spot to be in. Mm-hmm. It fosters the healthiest relationships. Mm-hmm. So as a parent, I don't know, what are some things we can be doing to be fostering that?
Sure. It's a great question. I think of attachment styles and so forth is something that is caught more than it's taught. And so I'll tell this little story about my kids and a conversation I had with them in the car many years ago, probably 12 years ago at this point. We were driving somewhere, and I just was striking up conversation. My oldest was probably 10. My youngest would be about 4 or 5. And I asked the question, I said, hey kids, if I could just teach you one thing in life, what do you think it would be? And I wasn't expecting the kind of profound insight that my 10-year-old was going to have, but she was sitting directly behind me, and when she said it, it just kind of felt like a warm knife going through butter coming through the back of my seat. She said, my follow-up question was that I asked that question. They said, "Oh, well, you would just teach us to love God." And I said, "Yeah," I said, that sounds about right. And then this follow-up question was the one where she got me. I said, "Hey kids, how do you think I'd go about doing that? Like if that was my goal, how do you think I would go about doing that?" And my 10-year-old says to me, she says, "Well, Dad, you will show us because we're watching you." And I'm like, dang, did I just hear what I think I heard? Is that it's like she put words to what we all know as parents. We hear our child use a word and we're like, where in the world did you learn that word? There's a good chance that word was learned at home.
Yeah.
It's possible it was a friend, it was somewhere else, but we know that our kids are learning inordinate amounts of material. Kids are so smart and they're so eager and ready to learn. Like they are sponges just absorbing words. I forget the exact statistic, but the number of words that a kid learns within a certain age demographic, it's off the charts. It's like you do the math and say how many words per day they're learning. It's a ridiculously high number. It's like, how in the world can our kids be learning and absorbing so much material so rapidly? And so as parents, it's important for us to recognize that we are establishing a system and a culture that's teaching our children that's way beyond just what we actively try to teach them.
Yeah.
In fact, most of what our kids learn is caught by how we're living our lives. And so I think like probably one of the first order of business for parents and say think about raising their children is what kind of culture am I going to have in my home? And have I been fostering that across time? If we think we can learn that from the time we find out we're pregnant until a baby's born, that's not early enough. We need to be attending to our own personal development and our own growth as individuals across time. And oftentimes what we find is that when we have children, we become increasingly aware of our own deficits and our own needs and our own sense of it's time. If there's anything that's going to make you grow up, it's have a baby. It's like all of a sudden life's not about you anymore. It's not just about how you want life to unfold, but you now have this unique responsibility of preparing and shaping a child to thrive within the environment in which they grow up, which is a really, really profound challenge. And so I think the first aspect is we work to get our own house in order. We get our own lives in order. We deal with our own issues and recognize the kind of culture that we're building. We foster really good communication with our spouse as we think about raising children within what I would say a traditional family with an intact family of a father and mother together. Single parenting is a very difficult space because now a person has this responsibility of doing it in a form of isolation that is very, very difficult. But for family where there's a mom and a dad in the home, it's really important for a good, solid communication to be occurring, good conflict resolution, good where children are watching how do mom and dad respond to each other, and kids are learning from that. And so in many ways, one of the best gifts that we can give our children is having healthy relationship with our spouse. And so I think that's probably one of the primary aspects of developing a secure attachment in our children, is that our children can have confidence that mom and dad are going to be okay. Mm-hmm. I remember, I forget how old my children were at the time, but I remember when we found out that someone close to us, that their parents were getting divorced. And I remember pulling my kids together at that time and saying, kids, does this scare you? That are you afraid that that could happen to Mom and I? And it surprised me because they all said yes to that question. And there was no reason for them not to say yes to that question, because somebody they knew that they thought was solid what wasn't solid. And so why would they not assume that if that can happen and surprise me over here, why would they assume that that couldn't happen to me at home? And that's a very legitimate fear.
Yeah.
And so the challenge is that, can I guarantee that would never happen to us? It's like, no, we're human too. Like I can't just give them a false promise of saying this absolutely couldn't happen. But what I did say to them is, I said, I want you to know that your mom and I are committed to one another. And we are committed to working through whatever issues come our way. And that no matter what, you are loved and you will be cared for, and our love for you will never change. Because what's very common for children, especially in the younger years, but even as they get older, is they're very egocentric. And so everything that happens in their life is their fault, good or bad. And so many children, even adults today, will look back and have a general sense that their parents got divorced and it was their fault. And so the security that we want to develop is that we will show our children that we will resolve our conflicts. We'll let our children see our conflict. We're not going to just hide it and just pretend that everything is just fine. But we will also then model for them problem-solving solutions in front of them. It's like, if we're going to let them see our conflict, we also let them see us resolve it. We also let them see us make better. You're smiling. Do you have a story, or tell me what you're thinking?
Yeah, I'm thinking about my wife was just in here a couple minutes ago, and we were talking about a situation that happened in the kitchen
right
just this weekend. And Rachel and I were having an argument, and Cyrus is sitting at the kitchen table, like, watching it happen. And he's recently been watching Daniel Tiger, which is like a Mr. Rogers spinoff, and a lot to do with it has to do with like managing emotions and stuff like that. And he could see that we were upset, and he starts singing one of the songs to us, and he's like encouraging us to take a deep breath and count to 4. And so we did that with him, and hilariously did help us. But then our argument didn't disappear. Like, we continued to have to work through that. But I am, and you've said this before, but I am so encouraged to hear that, like, conflict even in and of itself isn't the thing that needs to be like removed or avoided. A part of my own narrative and stuff is to like try and avoid conflict at all costs, but it just isn't a reality of life. It happens, it's going to happen. And I think even interacting with kids, like, I can see how there could be it makes sense to be like, if I want to raise a healthy kid, I don't want them to ever see us fight. Mm-hmm. But that's not the most helpful. But it's like, if they see us fight, they should, you've said this before, but they should also see us like reconcile as well. Right. And so, well, I don't know, that encourages me and feels like, okay, that seems like a realistic way of modeling a relationship that's real and committed to the other person.
Right.
And I can also see why, when we're thinking about that little matrix, that little quadrant matrix, it's high view of self, high view of others. If it helps foster that high view of others, when you see them fight, but you see them reconcile. It maybe not even just a high sense, but like a real sense of like, you're not perfect, but you're willing to do the hard work of trying to, be better and work through it. And
right. So if I feel a sense of respect and honor and like what I would say, that high view of you, and I also have a high view of myself, well, that means I'm going to assert myself and I want to contend with you. Like it's like, because you have so much value to me, but also because I also have value and because I also have something to offer, why would I not contend with you? To not contend with you would to be disrespectful to you, because I have something to offer to you.
Yeah.
And you have something to offer to me.
Or when I first heard you say that, I thought a little bit differently. Or it's to think that I don't have anything to offer, and so you just roll over and you just
right.
You're like, I can say, oh wow, that is a low view of self,
right?
And it's like, I can actually, now hearing you say that, it's like, oh, the conflict itself communicates that both people potentially have a high view of self and a high view of the other. That's actually, I didn't think of it.
And so it's like, if I'm not willing to contend with you, or if I roll over, I have this low view of self. Well, that's going to make me preoccupied. I'm going to desperately need you to affirm me. So I'm rolling over, and I don't have anything to offer, but please tell me I'm the best thing since sliced bread. Please tell me I'm okay. Please tell me that I'm loved. Please tell me I desperately need you to affirm me in my low sense of self. Or if I have a low sense of self and a low view of you, now I'm terrified that I'm just going to run into my sense of worthlessness. I can't pacify myself and help myself feel better. I can't self-soothe, nor can I expect and have you self-soothe for me. So my anxious or fearful style, I'll distance myself from you. I'll even distance myself from myself, likely by going to places of affirmation that are unhealthy, like social media, where false relationships, I can turn to false relationships that always tell me I'm okay, and I can trust that. So while I have a fearful, anxious attachment style, I can have confidence in the substance of affirmation on social media or other forms of acting out. It's like addiction. Addiction is a really high possibility when we're in that quadrant, because we have addiction promises to give us what we can't count on from ourselves or other people. And so that's why we actually want to have good, solid, high quality fights within our relationship. I have something to offer you. You have something to offer me. I can be a little bit dumb. You can be too. Like you can have some really bad ideas. I can have some really bad ideas. I can fight for my bad ideas, and you can fight for your bad ideas. But because I respect you, and I'm going to listen, and I'm going to hear you out well, I'm going to let you challenge my bad ideas, and I will change them. But I still maintain my high view of self because I value.
Yeah.
My sense of self isn't connected to my dumb ideas. Like, I can change my dumb ideas and say, thank you. You made me better. Now now our fighting, it's like we're fighting together for something rather than fighting each other. And so conflict in marriage ideally never goes away. In fact, it's like, please contend with me. I want you to engage with me, and I want to be engaged. So I want to bring something to you. I want you to bring something to me, and let's have it out. And that can be heated at times. That doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be just some really tame looking kind of process that's not connected to real life. It's like that can be a really animated, intense conversation. But when we walk away from it, everybody, including those watching, like our kids, will say, Mom and Dad just showed me how to stand up for myself and to listen to another person.
Yeah.
And now they can start feeling more secure. Now they have a place of security from which they can launch out into the future. So one of the aspects of attachment theory is this concept of secure base. So we're creating with our children a place of security from which they can launch into the world. It's like the Three Little Pigs. Like, they're going to go out into the world and make their fortune, and they're leaving home, and so they're headed out. And as parents, our responsibility is to foster this idea that our children are going to be out. We are sending them out. Ideally, we do not want our children living in our basement until their old age. They need to be launched. And they're going out into a dangerous place. They're going out into a space where there are wolves. that where houses of sticks and straw don't last. So we want to be able to teach our children how to have a secure, you go out and contend with the world, and I'm going to give you all the resources that I can in preparing you. I'm not talking about giving them money. I'm talking about giving them all the internal structural needs that they have to go out and contend with the world as it really is.
Yeah.
And we create that as children by one, building the quality relationship with our spouse that's solid and secure and that our children can count on. It doesn't have to be perfect. Like the perfect parent is a myth. What we want, and what the scientific literature, the term that often gets used, is we need good enough parents. We don't have to be perfect parents, but we need to be good enough. We need to have a sense of, kids need to have a sense of confidence that, you know what, mom and dad are going to be there. And that leads to another principle of building secure attachment is consistency. Is parents, not just as parents, we need to be consistent. As individuals, we need to be consistent. And one of the things that can bring about insecurity within children is a sense that, you know what, sometimes dad, man, I go to dad and he is just like, he's fantastic. Like he was so empathetic. He was so able to listen. He was so able to challenge me. His discipline in this was effective and it helped me. And you know what, I really can, and other times dad is so, man, he just yells and screams, or he's like, I never know for sure which dad I'm going to have. I never know. I'm never quite sure. Will mom hug me when I come through the door from the day, or is she going to be so chaotic and out of control and angry and spiteful that I come through the door and I need to guard myself, and I'm never sure which mom I'm going to have when I come home. It's like, and so if we see that kind of instability in the way we manage our emotions, in the way we manage our lives, that's a place for personal growth, of saying, it doesn't mean we have to be exactly the same, but it does mean that our kids have to have some approximation that mom is mom, dad is dad. That, like, I know what person I'm going to get. And many children have grown up in environments where they never know for sure when dad comes through the door. Is he going to be angry from work? Is he going to be happy? Is he going to bring me a toy? Or is he going to kick the dog and yell at me? Is he going to hit me? Is he going to and so when we don't know that, well, we're going to always be guarded, and it'll probably lead us into one of those three insecure attachment styles. By personality, by whatever mechanism, I may cower in the corner and be terrified and just afraid. I may try to be preoccupied and do whatever I need to do to pacify dad because I desperately need him to want me, and so I will, and I'll have a much more preoccupied approach. Or you know what, I'll just emotionally check out from dad and I'll have nothing to do with him and just avoid, and I'll never build close relationship. And so consistency, and that our kids know what to count on, is a really important component of developing a secure base. And again, we're not talking about perfect.
Sure.
We're talking about, as a general rule across time, is there a consistency of personality, of personhood? And if there's not, if we assess ourselves and we say that may be a good place to say, I need help. Like it might be a good place to say, I want to get into an accountability group. I'll see a therapist. I want to attend to that area of consistency, and that will help. That'll help foster that for children.
Yeah, that's great. Just recapping the things I heard you just say: attending to our own development, really focusing on a healthy relationship with your spouse, and then consistency, like both as the way you parent and as just who you are. Right.
I think that another aspect of creating a secure base is attending to the emotional needs of children, like recognizing that our children have core basic needs that must be attended to. And this is where the concept of a good enough parent is important. It's like a good parent, a parent that's good enough, will attend to the needs of affection that their children have. That when a child comes for a hug, that we don't shoo them away. That doesn't mean that we don't ever allow our children to learn how to be
You
on.
gotta
how,
go
how
play
to,
by
how,
yourself.
How to go play by themselves. I'm not talking about that, but what I'm saying is that there are core emotional needs our children have, and that will be diverse between our children. So if we have multiple children, there's going to be different emotional needs that are more prominent for different children. That's connected to genetics, connected to personality. There's a lot of the variables for that. It's just there's no such thing as the same two people, and so but we pay attention to that emotional need, and so for us dads, that means we need to learn how to pay attention to the emotional needs of people. We need to pay attention to that. That's true for moms as well, but moms are will oftentimes have a and that's probably too stereotypical. Like there are, I probably want to hit the rewind on that and say, as parents, I'm not certain that women are better than men. I think stereotypically there may be some difference there, but probably not as much as the stereotype would imply. But so we pay attention and we learn how to use feeling words. We learn how to speak emotive language. We have an ability to express our own emotion. We can be sad. We can be happy. We can express anger. We can express uncertainty. We can talk about feeling adequate or inadequate. We have a robust emotional vocabulary for building connection with people. And when our children tell us stories, that we can attend to the emotional needs that are embedded within the story. And what that does is it begins to help a child recognize that what they feel and how they experience the world, that is going to be validated. Doesn't mean that whatever they feel is just, it's not like their feelings become the central, but it's that I can trust that you are going to connect with me. You're going to validate me, and you're not going to dismiss how I'm feeling. So there's a deep sense of warmth. We also provide what I would say appropriate sternness or discipline, where children recognize that there are boundaries that you can't cross, and there's consequences if you do. If we don't teach our children that, we're failing them in an essential way, because the real life has boundaries and has consequence and has and we talked about this in our spanking episode early in the podcast, and it's like, how do we discipline appropriately? What's the effective ways of discipline? But discipline is an absolutely crucial element of creating a secure base. But it can't be harsh. Has to be consistent, has to be clear. But discipline is very, very important. Involvement in our children's lives builds a secure base. It's a sense that, you know what, I care about you and what you do. I'm going to show up at your games. And I'm not going to just show up at your games, but I'm going to engage myself at your game. Like, you'll hear me from the sideline. I'm going to cheer you on. I'm going to celebrate your victories. I'm going to lament your losses. I'm going to be in it with you. I'm going to engage with you.
My dad has always been my biggest fan and advocate, and I remember at so many sporting events, hearing him hollering from the stands, and sometimes I'd be like, Dad, tone it back a little bit, but at the same time, at my core, I did always like that. I really did, even as much as there was a part of me that sometimes was like, you're embarrassing me. It was also like, yeah, but I know I matter so much to you.
Right.
So.
Right. Oh, I have no doubt that I would go to Kyrell's hockey games and it's like I'm just yelling at the top of my lungs, and there's times I can see him on the ice. I'm like, oh, Dad, just shut up. Just stop. But I do have a hunch that as a broad brush, we've all seen parents at games that are harsh and brutal with their children, and that feels different. That feels different. I remember at one of my kids' soccer games, the grandpa and the dad would just yell at this child and just
I've seen that before.
Belittling them because they missed the ball, and it's like, dude, the kid's 5. Of course he's gonna kick the ball out of bounds. It's like like watching kids soccer is like watching the herding of cats. It's like, that's what it is. And so it's like, we want to draw our kids towards development. And so we have to have appropriate levels of interaction. But being involved with our children and cheering them on and letting them know, like, you know what, I'm in it with you, will build a sense of, even if at times it might be annoying for them, there's probably a deeper level of, I'm glad that dad's here. I'm glad that mom's on the sideline. I'm glad I can count on them to care and be here, versus like the kid who's there playing the game and nobody's there cheering for them.
Right.
No one goes to their graduation. No one's showing up at their party. It's like, man, that's a really sad kind of process. And so if we want to build that sense of security, we're going to be involved and we're going to be there. And I'm on your team, and I have your back, and you can count on me. And as we do that, our kids will be building their strength, that they're going to be able to stand on their own, and they're going to be able to contend for themselves, and they will also be able to contend for the other people who are vulnerable. And so we're teaching our children to care because they feel vulnerable. If we back them, the likelihood of them growing up to back the vulnerable is really, really strong. If I beat them up as a parent, what I'm going to be doing is teaching them that they should beat up the vulnerable. And so it's like, if I'm harsh and critical and demeaning, what's likely going to happen? I'm probably going to see my kid be harsh and demanding and demeaning to the vulnerable kids. And so it's almost like bullying is taught to that kid by a parent who probably has just a misplaced sense of need for them to succeed. And so we want to pay attention developmentally to what our children need today. And that's that aspect of being emotionally present and aware and saying, I want to give you what you need in this season of development. I want to help you where you're at today, and not where it's like, so I will interact with you differently at 5 than I will at 15. And so if a 15-year-old is missing the shot because he messed up on a fundamental, then it's appropriate for coaching and for a sense of, hey, we got to work on that fundamental because that shot could have been made, and you have the responsibility to make it. So let's work on this fundamental because I believe in you and you're able to make the shot. But at 5, they aren't even developmentally able to make the shot consistently, no matter what. It's like They might get lucky and get the shot in, and it's like we celebrate it like they're like that they just won the Stanley Cup. But when they're 15, we may have a very different approach because it's developmentally appropriate. And so paying attention to developmental spaces is like we're building security across time. And so we adapt our methods across time to match their development. I think another area is, and this is a hard space, but it's apologizing to our children, is being willing to say I was wrong. And that means if we're honest, our kids should have a robust memory of mom and dad coming and saying, I'm sorry. You know what? The way I responded to you was not okay. I overreacted. I was frustrated, and there's no excuse for it. I'm sorry for the way I communicated with you. And that doesn't invalidate the need to correct you. So we have to balance this element of, if I discipline harshly or if I make a mistake and it's like, okay, you're acting out. Yes, it ticked me off. I feel angry. I'm already agitated. I can apologize and still maintain some sense of consequence or some sense of discipline.
Still say your action was still not appropriate, and I'm not going to allow that to continue to happen.
Right.
Rather than, because I can see the flip side is like, you just overwhelm yourself with this sense of guilt, and I shouldn't have responded that way. I'm a terrible dad. So, okay, fine. Well, you can do whatever you want.
Right. And so what we're
try and compensate for the own guilt you experience.
Exactly. And so what we're doing in that environment is much like having a fight with our spouse. It's like we're able to say, I will contend with you, and you have something to offer me, and I have something to offer you. And you know what? I may well find out that I did something dumb. I overstepped my bound. I need to be corrected as well. And so I am going to make an adjustment because I have a high view of you as my child. You are an autonomous individual that is honorable and deserves to be protected and deserves to be honored and respected. And I will respect you so highly that I will acknowledge that I'm wrong. And because I believe in you and I love you. However, I also have a high view of myself. And so even though I'm wrong, and even though I will apologize for it, I am not completely wrong. And you are not completely right. And so that means I can maintain my authority as a parent. I can maintain my sense of, I will hold the line. I'll just acknowledge that I held the line in an inappropriate way. And now I'm going to adjust how I'm holding the line, but I'm going to still hold the line because I'm dad. It's like, there's an authority structure here. Like this is my home. This is like, I am going to hold this line, and kids desperately need dads and moms to hold the line and to say no, and no means no. And it's not negotiable. Now, how I say no and how I maintain and hold the no, I can adjust as needed, and I can take responsibility when I hold the line in an inappropriate way, but we never let go of the line. And as we do that, now kids begin to develop a sense of confidence. This is a secure place. Like, I know the rules. I know how this works. And it's preparing our children to launch. And so when we think about children launching, now the secure base becomes a safe haven. So if you think about little children and having a safe haven, it's this element that a child will go out and play with their friends. And so if you think about a toddler, they run outside to play with their friends, and they fall down and they scrape their knee, or they get in a scuffle with another child, or somebody steals their truck, or somebody hits them in the head with the ball, or it's like something doesn't go, and they come running back to mom crying.
Yeah.
What they've just done is they left their secure base to go out and play, and they've come back now to their safe haven where they can be coddled, where they can be loved, where they can be welcomed back. They can put a Band-Aid on their knee. Yeah. They can have a kiss on the forehead. They can have a sense of, hey, you're still safe. I'm still here. Now go back out and play. And so we push them back out into that place of go out into the world, make your fortune. As a 2-year-old, go out and play. As a 5-year-old, go out and play. As a 15-year-old, go to youth group, go to this event, go play your sport. And we keep pressing our children out, and they go out from the secure base, and then they return back to their safe haven. Yeah. And we keep doing that. Even into our adult years, we almost all develop this sense that we have a safe haven that we can return to. If we have a secure environment at home, what often happens is that rather than it being a location, it becomes a relationship, or it becomes connected to something of depth. From our faith tradition and from our faith perspective, ultimately we begin to see God as this ultimate place of security and of safe haven. Like I can be sent out, but I also can return back to this place of safety. And so when we have a secure base and this element of safe haven, now I'm prepared to go out into the world and build my house of bricks. I can go out and be the big bad wolf can come, and it can knock on the door. It can pound on the door. It can try to come down the fireplace, but the cauldron of hot water will be boiling and the fire will be burning hot. And it's like it's an impermeable place of safety. It's like this, I am secure. And so we're teaching our children across time to go out and build your house of bricks. Yeah. And again, it's never perfect. It's like we have our own struggles, we have our own issues, but it's helpful for us to have a vision of what is it that we want to accomplish as parents. And so for young parents and for new parents or people thinking about having children, it's really important to start saying, this is not a small task. This isn't something I just paste onto my life as an adjunct thing to the rest of what I do. Yeah. If you do that, you're going to be overwhelmed and it'll ruin your life. But if you approach it properly and in a way that that has a vision attached to it can be some of the most life-giving and beautiful things we can engage in. But it will change us, and it will help us grow and develop. But that's my take, Sam, on attachment and parenting. And what other thoughts do you have, or questions, or comments?
I feel like I've got so much that I personally want to think about and process more for myself. I think especially the being a newer parent. I'm only 4 years into it. The emphasis on the continuing to have a good, healthy relationship with your spouse being really pivotal to this, because like what I'm finding is that little kids are so needy. They have so many practical needs so continuously that it's very easy to give all of your energy, and especially your energy while you're home, focused towards them and caring for them. And I can see how easily it can become to, neglect keeping a healthy, vibrant relationship with your spouse. And so, but how important that is to the, health and benefit of your kids. And
right.
So I feel like a lot of people, I don't think I'm alone in that. And I think probably, I would suspect that that's probably a common thing for new parents, especially to kind of wrestle through when you've been married for several years before then. Now that relationship has been completely altered by the addition of new family members.
Right.
So
and
that
highly needy family.
And highly needy family members. Not like thanks for joining us for dinner. Now you can go do your thing, and we'll see you again tomorrow after for breakfast.
Right. It's like you make the food. You actually literally feed me. You clean up the food. You clean me
you.
up.
Yeah. I put you to bed. Yeah. I wake you up.
Right. Yeah, and it is. It's an all-encompassing kind of investment into our children, and it's like early on, it takes everything we got. One of the things that's helpful for new parents to consider is what rituals they might develop to maintain connection within their relationship. I'm trying to remember if we talked about rituals in one of our marriage conversations, but we might revisit those in a future podcast where we can talk about the importance of developing healthy rituals in marriage. But one thing that new parents can really start to think through is what kind of rituals might you build into your family structure that you can just count on, that don't take any thought. Like they just become the culture or the habit of the home. And those rituals can really function to create that safety and security without us having to always be thinking it all through.
Okay.
And so like one of the rituals my parents had as a kid that they still practice to this day is every night when they would go to bed, I would always see my parents waited down on their knees beside their bed. No matter what happened in the day, how badly they might have been fighting, how disconnected they may have been, they would always, every single night, I never remember it not happening unless somebody wasn't home, they would get down on their knees, and I would hear one of them pray. They would pray what I would say an extemporaneous prayer of the day for all of their kids, etc. And then they would do a joint prayer where they would pray out loud the Lord's Prayer, as recorded in Matthew, I think it is. Yeah. And they would go through the ritual of the Lord's Prayer, and then they would go to bed. I remember that every single night of my life.
Wow.
That was a ritual that my parents engaged in. I go home to my folks today, and my dad's 81, I think, and my mom's in her upper 70s, and you will still hear them. They will get down on their knees, and they will pray out loud together, and they will end with the Lord's Prayer, and they will go to bed. So rituals like that are powerful, and they might not always be meaningful all the time, but the ritual itself becomes meaningful. And so we can build rituals into our lives across all sorts of spaces. We can have a We can have a bedtime ritual like I just described with my parents. We can have a what do you do when someone comes home? What kind of ritual might you build? And one of the rituals that I try to attend to with my kids in my home is if anybody comes home, I stop what I'm doing and I go to them and I welcome them home. Say, hey, it's great to see you. How was your day? Welcome home. It's good to have you home. I don't do it with 100% consistency, but I do it probably way more times than I don't. And across time, I would say it's a ritual that I personally incorporated into my own approach to our home. And I wasn't actively thinking that I want to develop a secure base for my children or help them have a secure attachment style. It was that it's a relational thing. I want my kids to know I want them home. I want to be with them. I care about them. And so that becomes a deep ritual. Saying a prayer of thanksgiving for food becomes a ritual that kids can begin to count on. It's like, you know what, if we're going to all sit down at the table together, we may hold hands or we will bow our heads and we will give thanks for the food we're going to eat. It's a ritual that is meaningful and it's something that you can count on. And so there are all sorts of rituals across the day that we can begin to think about. How do we develop? Some of them just happen because of we just figure it out and we get into a cadence and it's the way things flow. There's something really powerful about being intentional about them and saying, this is a helpful ritual. One of the rituals my wife and I developed years and years ago is every night when we go to bed, we will look at each other and we'll say, how are you feeling today? Like, just give me a snapshot of how are you feeling? And it sometimes it's a meaningful conversation can emerge from that. Other times it's like nothing. It's just like, okay, that's what we feel and we're tired and roll over, go to sleep. And other times it can lead into a really meaningful conversation, but it's something we both count on. It's like, it doesn't matter how mad we might be at each other. It doesn't matter. It's like, it's kind of the way my parents approached their prayer time. It's like, we just ask each other that question. There've been times I dread going to bed because I'm frustrated with her. And it's like, I don't want to ask her how she's feeling. I don't want her to ask me how I'm feeling because I feel terrible and I don't like how I'm feeling. And I'd rather you not ask me because I don't want to talk about it. But the ritual creates a place of safety and security, whether I like it or not. It helps me. It helps me have a sense of what's going to happen. So if we develop those in our family, it can be really, really powerful across time. Yeah. It's a little bit like put $1 in the bank every day for the rest of your life and see what you have when you retire. Yeah. It's like, oh, that $7 a week actually made a difference. And rituals are a bit like that. It's like we're making a deposit in this very small thing across time accrues tremendously for building that sense of secure base and that sense of secure attachment. But I think that's probably enough for today.
That's great.
Thanks for dialing in. For those of you who are listening, appreciate it. Feel free to drop us an email. You can find that in the show notes. But appreciate you dialing in. All right. Thanks, Sam.
Thanks, Tim.
Have a great day.
We hope you enjoyed this week's episode of Guideposts with Dr. Tim Stauffer. If you're finding this podcast beneficial, please share it with a friend or leave us a review. Also, make sure to check out the show notes where you can find links to resources as well as an email address. We want to hear from you. Send us your questions, feedback, and topic ideas for future episodes. Thanks for listening.